In this episode of Motive Garage presented by Sparesbox, we start the fabrication and assembly work on JET200, ready for the 2023 World Time Attack Challenge. In the last episode of this build, you saw that we got the engine and box into the car. Well, now it's the fun part. We have to make up all the new Raceworks lines and fittings, get the dry sump sorted. We've got fabrication work to do to turn JET200 into a proper race car. Rob Arbolino and Ante, they're on the way over right now. So let's get this party started. There's a whole bunch of fab work coming up.
We had Ante head over again to do the rest of the fab work in the engine bay. We decided to make hard lines for the oil feed and return between the engine bay and tank. It's neater, lighter, sits higher, and it can't suck closed under suction. It really is the most reliable way to do the dry sump lines. More work, but worth it.
So first up, the engine bay. We did get it finished, but we've had to send some parts off to powder coating, but we can overlay a quick shot of what the engine bay looks like completely finished without that done. But although you probably might look initially and go, what's different to before? It looks a little bit different with powder coating. We've actually changed quite a lot of stuff. Obviously the main thing is a Ross dry sump kit. So now we have a dry sump pan, dry sump pump. We have a new Ross balancer, obviously their Ross trigger kit as well. So that's quite a lot changed just with that alone. We had the inlet manifold and exhaust manifold and everything, a lot of bits and pieces sent off to be powder coated. We did Nardo grey on everything that's non-exhaust related. And then the guys at Competition Coatings did all the exhaust stuff in there. Obviously their ceramic coating, which is good for trapping in heat and controlling heat within the engine bay. We added some of the gold heat insulation to the firewall as well. We redid all the EGTs on that side and run them differently. Two reasons: one, to neat them up; two, we are redoing all the wiring. So there's currently no wiring in this engine bay while Rowan is off building the loom separate to the car to put in the new Haltech Nexus ECU. All new sensors, all new wiring complete, because obviously that was a big issue last year. So we've redone everything there. The other thing we did was basically re-plumb everything. So obviously the dry sump needed to be plumbed, but the engine bay had, you know, red and blue AN fittings that have been in this car, some of them for as long as, all the way back to 2007. We wanted to redo every line with Raceworks lines and fittings. So you can see there's a lot of new lines, a lot of new fittings, but a big thing was serviceability on the car. So by running the fuel pressure regulator and the sensor block up here in the corner, which we can do because we don't have a brake master cylinder, you can now actually get your hands and reach all the way down and just completely grab the starter motor. You can get to the alternator, the engine mount, you can get to the oil block. So the whole idea was serviceability on the car as well. So that's a big thing that we aim for. Where we ran the lines, everything, just making it very serviceable. Basically anything on the car, we can get to it, we can work on it at the track. That was a big deal. The radiator pipe's the same, but we finally got some new Turbo Smart silicone on there. The Clearview filter, we mounted it over here. We did have it back up here, but now it's down the front because there's no catch can anymore because the catch can's in the back, which we'll get to. So some things have remained the same. The actual engine combination itself hasn't changed. It's just everything around the engine that we've changed for either to be more reliable, more serviceable, or brand new because we didn't trust it from years and years of motorsport with this car. So yeah, a pretty sizable freshen up that snowballed a little bit. What started off as engine out, dry sump back in, thought it would be a couple of days, did turn into a pretty frantic 6-day build with Ante, Rob Abellino, and obviously Hanslo was over here and Rowan as well. So yeah, it's been a pretty intense week, but yeah, a lot got done and it's a pretty serious build. But let's keep moving around. We'll show you inside, then in the boot, and then we'll go underneath. Now you saw in the previous video that we mounted the dry sump tank inside the cabin. We put it on the passenger side back seat because there's no fuel tank below there anymore. But we put it here for weight distribution. We don't want to put it behind the rear axle. We don't want to put it on the same side as the driver. Now, it got put there for weight distribution, then obviously we've got to make all the lines work. So you can see that we have a bulkhead on the other side where you get the oil line from the engine into the dry sump tank, and you can see the vent line which runs up over the roll cage and back to the cam cover. And then you've got the other one that goes to a bulkhead to go to the spew tank in the boot. So very neat, but we do need to build a cover for it, which Chris Spicer is going to do. We moved our power steering over to here. Our battery's going to get moved forward and down to here as well. There's still some old lines in there. We may actually just replace those with Raceworks stuff just for uniformity very soon, which will be fun because I just love making AN lines over and over again. But it's pretty easy when you've got good quality products. So yeah, that's the dry sump tank in there. Like I said, we may replace these other lines just for the sake of uniformity and to have nice, fresh, brand new stuff. But yeah, it's pretty cool how we've done this. And the rest of it's in the boot. So in the boot, our fuel cell and fuel cooler remain. I got rid of the flex fuel sensor because we didn't need it, and I replaced that with a new Raceworks inline filter. The reason I did that is even though there's filters on the TI pumps inside the tank, if they ever have an issue or dissolve or have any problem with 85, at least you've got that filter coming out of the fuel tank. I put a diff breather here because it's better than a 600ml Mount Franklin water bottle. It's a Raceworks catch can, but I just modified it to suit being a diff breather. On this side is the spew tank, which is a Raceworks catch can as well, 3.5 litre one that we've modified, where basically it's the breather for the dry sump. So rather than having a catch can in the engine bay off the cam covers, we now have everything going into the dry sump tank, and then that has to breathe somewhere, so it breathes into the boot. But you don't want to have, like, I guess, the fuel vapor associated with the 85 and the oil and stuff filling up your boot. You've got a fuel system in here, you've got wiring, etc. So it needs to breathe outside of the car. So it goes through that catch can to try and separate the oil and air, etc. out from each other. But then the breather itself is actually underneath the rear of the car. And obviously with the way aero works, it'll basically go out into behind the car rather than halfway through the car and risk getting it on tires or anything like that. So, but it's an SR20, they don't breathe very much. We also have a drain under there as well for the spew tank. So rather than have to pull the tank out and muck around, there's just a little fitting underneath, which we'll show you now. We'll get it in the air. So if you look under the rear bar of the car, we don't have a diffuser or anything here because my attitude has always been that for a diffuser to work correctly, it either needs to attach to a flat floor or it needs to be fully CFD designed to know it's going to work. So we've just basically cut half of the rear of the car off and raised it up, which is basically means it's just void space so that the air can get out from under the car easier. So that's why we don't care about having a couple of things hanging off here. So this is the breather for the spew tank, that's the drain for the spew tank, that's the drain for our fuel tank. So yeah, just a little bit sticking out. Let's move down. This has to be one of my favourite parts of this build, and that is Ante made hard lines for the dry sump for the feed and return to the tank itself. Why did we do that? A few reasons. You can see here, if you have a look at how long that line is, it's a good solid 2 meters each direction. Now, if you can imagine, if you had 2 meters of braided line under suction as that pump's trying to suck it, it's a long way to suck. That doesn't sound right, does it? It's a long way to suck, so you've actually risked the hose collapsing. If you can imagine, the longer the straw and the more you have to suck through it, the more chances it has of closing. So by having a hard line like this, it's much more reliable with the line itself. The other thing is it's actually lighter. This alloy tubing is lighter than braided line. So yeah, by doing it this way, it's also more compact. It's actually not as big as the braided line itself, so we can keep it up nice and close. You can see the gearbox crossmember protects the line anyway. So now by having these hard lines, the flexible line is only just this section here and this section here over the tail shaft. There'll be a shield going between the tail shaft and the line, just in case you're worried about that. The other thing that's cool is we actually put drains on these lines. If you can imagine, this is the lowest point of the oil system right here. So if we drained the main dry sump tank, these lines would still be full of oil. And obviously it means you can't change the oil properly. So this is pretty much the lowest point of the oiling system. So by having these 2 drains here on these hard lines, we can actually drain the oil system properly. Like, we can drain all of it. Yeah, you can see they run up here. It makes it a lot neater to get the lines in. And what's really cool is this piece of the hard line has 3 -10 fittings on it, which join into the 3 hoses that are the outlets from the pump for the scavenge. So, but I tell you what, Rob did an awesome job under here with the oil lines. The amount of oil lines that we have to fit under here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, he's managed to fit all 7 oil lines under the front of the sump, neatly in line with each other. But at the same time, you can still access the fittings, you can still tighten them, you can pull them off, you can check everything. He's also heat sleeved every one of them for better heat management. And also the heat sleeve just adds another layer of protection for rubbing things against it so the line doesn't get damaged. So we've really tried to think about every possibility that could happen at the track with a car like this. And yeah, but it will be protected by obviously the front splitter and under tray as well. So there's a lot going on under here, but man, Rob killed it with the plumbing on this car, because there's so many lines we had to make for this car. But yeah, the finish is unreal. So the fabrication and the plumbing for the running gear is now finished in this car. I've sent off the intercooler pipes, intake and a few other things to get powder coated so we can finish the nice new neat look of the engine bay. But the car is going off to Chris at CS Engineering tomorrow, because he's going to be doing all the fabrication and engineering work on the aero side of the car. So we're going to raise the rear wing, we're making a new front splitter, we're making barge boards, and he's going to make the cover for the dry sump tank. But knowing Chris, he'll probably get excited and make a few other things up for the car as well. In the meantime, Rowan is working on the wiring loom at home, because he's already taken all of the measurements. So in theory, he'll probably go visit CS Engineering a couple of times to do a final check on a few things. And we should have a wiring loom in the car this week as well. Once the loom's in, the fab's done, it's off to Matt Hanslow at Red Sun to get the car tuned. Now, because the engine's already been run, we don't have to do a run-in as such. We basically just get into it, get tuning, and I want to use the dyno more just to test the car out and make sure that we can give it a hard time on the dyno before it hits the track for the first time. So we're on the, we're halfway through this build, I reckon now, and we've got a lot done so far, so we're looking good for World Time Attack, which is less than 4 weeks away from right now.